Hey everyone, we're back with another edition of the Federalist Radio Hour. I'm Emily Jashinsky, culture editor here at the Federalist. As always, you can email the show at radio@thefederalist.com. Follow us on Twitter at FDRLST. Make sure to subscribe to our YouTube channel if you're watching this there. I'm joined today by my colleague, senior editor at the Federalist, Christopher Bedford. Chris, thanks so much for taking the time to chat today.
Oh, I'm glad to be here.
You know,
we're speaking... day in the country, isn't it? 2021 is shaping up to be awesome.
Yeah, I was going to say, I mean, this is just, podcasting as usual, but it does seem like the second impeachment is hitting differently, doesn't it?
I mean, is it like as newsworthy, the second impeachment this round?
Well, but this is an impeachment where the president is on his way out in a week.
You recall when we were learning about impeachment growing up at basic school, like in grade school, maybe high school, you read about the impeachment of Richard Nixon and you watch the videos and the victory sign and all that. Do you remember that Richard Nixon was never actually impeached? And the reason for that is because he left office. Like, this is basic grade school stuff. And so I understand that the Democrats basically want to make sure that Donald Trump can't get a job as a shoe shine anymore. Like, they don't want him doing anything in politics. They don't want him running for federal dog catcher. An impeachment would bar him from office. But I just don't think it's a very good idea for them to do what they're doing here. It ties up Joe Biden's opening term, which, whatever, I don't care. It implicates a huge amount of Republicans who are weak-kneed, unfrightened, and are really excited to get away from the orange man who they pretended to like for so long. But I don't even know if it's going to be legal to impeach a president who's no longer in office.
Well, yeah, let's get into that. So you have a piece up on the Federalist today, and it's called 4 Reasons McConnell's Impeachment. It's basically, the gist of it is McConnell's impeachment blunder. So can you tell us a little bit about why you're characterizing Mitch McConnell's conduct in recent days as an impeachment blunder?
I mean, because it's not just like political malpractice, what he did. So, Mitch McConnell, if you're catching up on this, if you've been mercifully unaware of what Mitch McConnell's been up to, he leaked to the New York Times on the eve of the impeachment vote in the House that he was open to impeaching the president because he thought this would be a way for the Republican Party to move on from being the party of Donald Trump. It's kind of like, in the last week of the guy's now lame duck presidency, the Republicans pretend that he wasn't there, which is not a very good idea in the first place. And he came out at that time at the same time as Liz Cheney, who is the third in charge of the House of Representatives Republicans, daughter of Dick Cheney. And they said, we're going to do impeachment. And for a second there, it kind of looked like Republicans might break. I mean, you're trying to count U.S. senators like Murkowski, Collins, Romney, Sass. These guys are going to drop and join with the GOP and try to convict this guy. McConnell now doing it is going to provide a lot of cover. But it turned out, in order to believe, one, that you can just fire Donald Trump and this is all over and then everything goes back to normal the way it was, like George W. Bush years, is really naive. To think that Washington can make this decision and just change the way the entire GOP voter structure and even donor structure to a point has changed is incredibly hubristic. And it's a really stupid idea. So the first thing I highlighted was the rollout. It's difficult if you're trying to plan a party coup. Like, you can't just hand out flyers in the hall. You can't put a bulletin board notice up like, come to my party, $5 for the first beer. But leaking it in the New York Times that we're going to attack the king of the party is a really bad idea. And not telling Kevin McCarthy. Kevin McCarthy and the president are on the outs right now. They're having a difficult time. He's been a team player for a long time, but he's really upset with the president for being so quiet during the riots, and has come out a little bit that they've fought since because the president's believing that claptrap that these are Antifa rioters and not MAGA people down there.
Right.
So they're fighting, but McCarthy wasn't ready and he didn't have the time to whip the votes, even if he'd wanted to whip the votes. So you ended up with Liz Cheney leading 9 other congressmen against Donald Trump, 9 other Republicans, which is incredibly stupid. It just ends up being them condemning the 95% of their conference that didn't go with that. Mitch McConnell starts to panic a little bit. But you have to want, and he withdraws it, and he puts out a plan and says, you know what, maybe we can't do a trial, and I don't even know which way I'm going to vote, which is completely retreating. But Ben Domenech explained this so well in the transom. The plan was a really big problem. Like, what is your party? Is your plan to rip the party apart? Is your plan for Donald Trump to start a third party? Don't you understand how many Republican voters would leave for that? And then what, we're going to have a MAGA party and a suburban women party, and then the Democrats? This is like not a really winning strategy for the right. And
it's really funny you just said that, because I was actually just talking today about how the future of the party is impossible because you have these two. You're either, and this applies to Democrats too. You're either the party of the working class, you're the party of the suburban women, and you cannot do both because they're fundamentally incompatible. Don't you think that's true?
Unfortunately, it's starting to seem like that. Although suburban women voters, I think, would be more open to a working class party that didn't tweet about Mika Brzezinski bleeding from her face. Trump had a certain working class, even though he's like not a working class guy, he's very comfortable among working class people, more as comfortable as he is probably more comfortable than he is amongst the Super Elite because they actually like him. And he's from that kind of Queens background, being on construction sites, being in real estate, dealing with hard people. He just gets along really, really well with them, but he speaks like someone from Queens. And the way, an old non-politically correct man from Queens speaks isn't necessarily the way that a woman who lives outside of Milwaukee wants to hear at her dinner table. And I think that was a big turnoff for a lot of the women. So we'll see if this happens, but I'm wondering if they come back to this party.
Yeah, so let's continue with your reasons. My coffee just went down the wrong pipe here, so that's why I'm coughing a little bit. I do not have COVID, but I am drinking this disgusting Keurig coffee, so that's why I'm choking. Anybody chokes on Keurig coffee, it happens to the best of us. But let's get into your other reasons, because I interrupted you at this point about suburban women and the working class. I do think you're correct, but I also do think the working class is so exhausted by politics as usual that a huge part of Trump and any heirs to Trump's appeal are their will be that sort of aesthetic and symbolic gesturing against the political establishment in a more anti-establishment and aggressive way than suburban women would be comfortable with, and suburbanites in general would be comfortable with. That said, now that I've said my piece, continue to say your piece about why McConnell's impeachment blunder is doomed to fail.
Well, third, you got the voters. You got the rollout there, and then you've got the plan itself, which is like I characterize it as the kind of plan that's so stupid it would take like a Politico reporter whose only friends work for Nancy Pelosi to come up with this. Like, if McConnell impeaches the president, it'll be a show of bravery. The GOP will be reborn. Like, it's really bad advice. But the third thing is the voters. Now, it's funny. I wrote a column earlier this week that made reference to, like, this is not the first time our sacred institutions have been attacked in Washington, D.C. on live camera by political violent mobs. Well, we had the White House attack. We're coming up next week on the 4-year anniversary of the inauguration riots, which raged through our streets. I had to run. My date had to take her shoes off, and we had to run to the street. They were attacking people with their fists. They were torching cars. They were flipping police cars. Here in Washington, they've attacked the White House, left-wing violence. So, like, people in D.C. forget that. And the guys in Capitol Hill who saw that, granted, frightening riot on last Wednesday at the Capitol are really self-absorbed about it. But they're sitting here only thinking about that and only thinking about the vote. And none of them are thinking about the fact that Trump just got 74 million people who have lived through these last 4 years of violence, don't have amnesia about it, to vote for him. And this vote against Donald Trump is not just going to make them go away. They're not. They're angry, and they don't see a huge difference. They don't want political violence of any kind, and it's been tolerated for years.
That's the thing. This is all happening in a broader context where people have not only watched the last few years, but this was something that was brewing for decades, literally, because the hypocrisy goes back decades, and it hit a boiling point. It hit critical mass. It's finally snowballed over the last couple of years, particularly this last year, to the point where that hypocrisy is so infuriating. It can lead to some really nasty and negative things, but that's with a small slice. The 74 million voters aren't people that are storming the Capitol. They're people that are casting a ballot for Donald Trump because, a large part of them are so fed up with the way that the media forgets things like the political violence the left committed. I actually want to stay on this point for a moment because I watched ABC News's 24-hour special on the storming of the Capitol, and I was there, by the way. I believe you were there too, right, Chris?
Yeah, I was.
Yeah, and so ABC News special is filtered through this social justice lens, which treats it as a racial issue and sort of pulls that thread throughout their entire special on what happened in the storming of the Capitol. And
I didn't see a racial issue down there.
Well, so here's what they do. They continue to go back to Trump outside St. John's holding the Bible. And they continue to go back to the peaceful protests outside Lafayette Square, which both of us, by the way, witnessed this summer as well. And they literally don't even mention that the night where there were chemical irritants, and that happened on several nights, but the main night where chemical irritants were used, there were actually people trying to tear down a statue in front of the White House. They literally don't even mention that. They don't even mention.
They lit the church on fire.
They lit the church on fire. I mean, like they were provoking police. They were trying to breach the line of police there. And so this is like what rankles. It's literally why I do what I do. I saw this when I was a teenager growing up in Wisconsin, and I was so infuriated by it. I came out here, Wisconsin, yeah. But you know what? I don't think that they fully understand the reckoning that's going to unfold under Biden.
I mean, imagine the left-wing violence that we'd be experiencing right now if Donald Trump had won re-election in this Capitol. It would have been much more violent than we even the level that we saw, the terrifying things that we saw, and people dead and an officer dead this past week at the Capitol. The amount of officers who've died, the political violence. I mean, where that church was lit on fire and where the statue of Lafayette was tried to be torn down, like that you're referencing here, and where you used to live near, and you were a witness to the violence and the barbarism that was going on there frequently. Sorry, I've got an animal visitor who's sniffing my wires. Hello, animal.
It'd be Chris's cat.
Yeah, it's a cat. I'm sorry, I'm embarrassed. You outed me. The mayor renamed the park after them. She surrendered the park to the rioters, gave them a name, and they used it to build a mock guillotine and to attack the White House. And meanwhile, they're saying Josh Hawley and Ted Cruz led these riots because why? Because they said that there was something fishy with the election and they're going to object. That's called insurrection. They should be banned. They should be disbarred. They should be put on no-fly lists. I mean, if this wasn't live, I would say F these people because they're out of their minds. And that actually brings me to the last thing. We're witnessing an unreal assault on our freedoms, not just on our Twitter accounts and our Instagram accounts, but on the actual ability to do business on the internet, to interact in the U.S. economy. We're seeing that happen without any shred of evidence. Like Antifa is organized using Twitter against the Daily Caller when I was there and was attacking us. They've coordinated violence on all kinds of social media platforms before Parler existed. And there's no evidence given yet that Parler is behind any of this violence at all. They're starting to deny credit card companies, or you can't even swipe your card for a lot of they're coming at some of the GOP websites now and some of the backers. They're going to email lists. And the Republican response is to impeach Donald Trump. This is the biggest attack we've ever seen not the biggest attack I've ever seen, but it's unprecedented in modern times push for corporate and democratic censorship of half the country, and Republicans are trying to censor Donald Trump over that. It's completely insane.
Well, so let's get into predictions, and I know that you've been working your sources, but how many votes do you think we saw 10 House Republicans break off and vote to impeach Donald Trump. How many votes do you think how many Republican votes do you think will go in favor of impeachment in the Senate?
I don't have an up-to-date count, unfortunately, on that. I just met with a bunch of Senate people. People are keeping their hearts very close to their chest. That's why I was actually late to recording with you. Over on the Capitol Hill, right in the military. We were in the green zone, right in the heart of it. Troops everywhere. People are keeping their cards pretty close to their chests. You started to see some of the folks that you didn't actually expect to be coming out against this. Some of the more moderate senators, basically also any senator who thinks that they want to have any kind of political future in this country has been coming out against impeachment and saying that they don't think this is the right time. I don't think this trial is going to happen anymore. I think McConnell has made clear once he got, slapped really hard on the PP, he decided, I'm not going to even do this because there's no win situation for me. So I don't think any of them are even going to have to take that vote. But if they did have to take that vote, I seriously think that you'd want to keep a close eye. Obviously, Murkowski and Collins, Romney, probably Sass. Maybe not. Sass has always talked a big game and then never actually voted really against the president before. But I know Manchin? He was really thrown up. Manchin's going to vote for impeachment.
Okay. So Manchin's that doesn't get anywhere near.
He's not a moderate.
That doesn't get anywhere. Well, obviously, I agree with that, but that still doesn't get us anywhere near the 17 vote threshold, right?
No.
Now, can you explain the mechanics of why you don't think that vote will happen? I mean, typically how this goes is that the House votes to impeach, and then that is the articles are automatically sent over to the Senate. There are some sort of constitutional technicalities. So why do you not think that anyone will end up having in the Senate having to take a vote on impeachment here?
Senate has the option if they want to even pick up impeachment if they want to. They can decide if there's no basis for it and not try it. The House has to send the articles of impeachment to the Senate for them to be willing to look at it, but it's completely up to them at that point if they want to try this. And the power of impeachment rests with the U.S. Senate. It doesn't go back to the House no matter what. And McConnell's, I'm so surprised he didn't do this actually, because he gets like a reputation for being a strategic genius. And the two things that he's ever actually done are nothing, like strategically do nothing. So Democrats will be like, oh, confirm this Supreme Court Justice, Merrick Garland. And he'll just be like, no. Like, we'll bring unrelenting pressure against you. And he's like, okay. And he just sits there. The turtle. He can outweight you. So he really could have done that in impeachment. And I'm surprised he didn't, because he only had 2 weeks. And now he's really only got 1 week left to actually do this. No impeachment trial has ever taken that long. It's always much
taken
much
less
longer.
than 21 days, I believe, is the shortest impeachment.
Yeah, so he only has about a week, which means he doesn't have remotely enough time to do an actual trial. So it's easy for him to sit this one out. I'm surprised he didn't do that in the first place. His other skill, and we were discussing this today, the Republicans have done a really good job over the last 4 years of like, all right, Donald Trump's the president, so here's what we're going to do. We're going to take pictures with him. We're going to visit him. And then we're going to do everything that we want to do, and we're going to call it MAGA. Okay? So, like, corporate judges is MAGA. Tax cuts for corporations, super MAGA. This is MAGA. And then people are like, they said MAGA. Trump's happy. And they kind of just went with it. And now that he's leaving, I think they're just going to go back to, they're going to try and go back to the old GOP. The problem they have here is that literally 40% of elected Republicans have joined office, have been elected since Donald Trump was a candidate for office, a successful candidate. They live in the age of Trump, and the voters are awake. We've had a problem in the GOP for so long where the donor classes to here, it's like a bad case of scoliosis, and the voters are somewhere else. Now the voters are even further away, and I don't think they're coming back.
Well, I was going to say, the politicians are, reflections of the voters. And my reading on the situation is that the Republican base often gets conflated with the MAGA base, but they're actually different. There are some suburban voters that are not on board the MAGA train. There are some wealthy voters that are not necessarily on board the MAGA train. And then there's this new base that has been voting Republican since 2016. Maybe some of them did not vote Republican before, even if it sort of seemed like
in Wisconsin and Michigan.
Right. And maybe it seemed like a foregone conclusion that eventually they would because of the creeping wokeness of the Democratic Party. But this is like a really new thing that Republicans have to deal with. Republicans have always believed that their policies benefited the working class ultimately, although that's been an impossible branding exercise over the past few decades.
More in taxes.
Right. But now they actually have to be responsive to the working class and to the working class in a way that they weren't before at all. And that ultimately brings us to this question. This is a two-part question, and these are both really big questions for you. The first part of that question
I'll be the judge of if they're good questions.
Yeah, okay. All right, well, you can rate me on a scale of Jake Tapper to 10. With Jake Tapper being the lowest, of course.
He's gonna DM you over that.
I hope he's watching. I know he's watching. I'm sure. This is captivating television, much more captivating than any.
There's like a siren that goes off. Somebody needs me. Jake Tapper to the rescue.
Somebody at the Federalist said something mean. I need to jump in. But anyway, so the questions I have, two-part question here. The first is, strategically, how does the impeachment maneuvering play out? What is the politically expedient way? How do you think this will impact both parties if it does or does not happen? And then secondly, how does that impact the future of the sort of Trump base of the Republican Party?
So if it happens, and this is like McConnell's thinking here, I think, is he removes the specter of Donald Trump from the 2024 field, and he clears the air so that other people can run. Yeah. Now, I think that's a really, really stupid idea because, one, it doesn't clear the air. It implicates half of the GOP in condemning, or a third of the GOP, or a quarter, in condemning the GOP, condemning their base, saying CNN was right the whole time, saying Donald Trump was wrong the whole time, and we're sorry. That seems like a disaster. Also, who does it clear the air for? Like, is Nikki Haley going to swoop in and win? Like, she's awful. She's awful. So who's going to run for office and actually win? Is it going to be Ted Cruz? Is it going to be Josh Hawley? Well, Mitch McConnell wouldn't be very happy about that at all. That's if he's impeached.
Yeah, and so I think a huge allure of impeachment, and having spent, the Trump administration covering the Republican Party and the conservative movement, I think a huge allure of impeachment is that Republicans in Washington want to sort of have that insurance policy where Donald Trump could never run for public office again. And the reason I think that is because, all of the things that the liberal media says are true behind closed doors about establishment Republicans and even some conservative Republican politicians whispering and venting their frustrations about the president are true in my experience. And so I think the real allure of impeachment is that sort of very enticing possibility of barring Donald Trump from public office.
If they want to do it, they should just get together with all their friends at CNN and say, all right, here's the plan, guys. Everyone be really nice to Donald Trump for the next 4 years. Everyone say nice things, say he did a really good job, and we're really happy. He deserves some retirement because he's such a great president, and he probably won't come back. But if you make fun of him, he's going to come back.
Yeah, he will, because this goes to the myth of the White House Correspondents' Dinner that Barack Obama ribbed him at. But the point is, I think this goes to more like the Republican establishment remains out of touch, not entirely, but out of touch with the fact that you cannot purge Trumpism from the Republican Party by just banning Donald Trump from ever seeking public office again.
Because they think it's a personality. They really believe that.
Yes. And you just mentioned Cruz and Hawley, but I actually think the enduring elements of Trumpism that will be manifesting candidates, you're talking about somebody like Don Jr., you're talking about somebody like Corey Lewandowski or Ivanka Trump, and you can sort of go down the line of people who are Trump loyalists before they're Republicans.
Ivanka's a liberal. I love Ivanka.
Well, I mean,
I'm a red-blooded American man.
Ivanka said she said she's fully adopted the MAGA agenda, and so. Listen, this is her public statement is that she's now pro-life. And so anyway, what I'm saying is that the heirs to Trumpism, even if you purge Donald Trump from ever being able to run for office again, and you get through this impeachment vote, which it will not happen, the Senate will not impeach Donald Trump. And even if you did it, though, the point is Republicans don't necessarily understand that they still now have to be responsive to a hardened, 30-40% of the base that is pro-Trump before they're pro-GOP. And last week when I was talking to people at the rally, long before it turned into a riot, they were telling me, in a heartbeat, they would follow Donald Trump to a third party, that they're much more loyal to Donald Trump than they are to the Republican Party. And that's an element of Republican voters that the party is not prepared to reckon with.
I've talked to so many people, even here in D.C., swamp creatures, who are saying that this is the first time that they've ever felt proud of their party at the end of the election cycle, before Donald Trump was defeated. They're saying, wow, like this was a moment when I actually would call myself a Republican. Excuse me, animal. Now, since then, the GOP has so quickly tried to turn on that. Exactly. It's 30 to 40, 50, maybe even more % of the party are hardened Donald Trump supporters. And they're going to back him. Another person that's interesting to potentially run is Ron DeSantis. Mm-hmm. He is someone who I didn't think was a very good candidate when he ran for governor of Florida. I made a joke, maybe on the Federalist podcast, about how Republicans would be more likely to win if they had a paper bag that had a smile on one side and a frown on the other. Yeah. But it turned out that his crack smoking, orgy attending opponent wasn't a great candidate either, Andrew Gillum. And DeSantis has shown himself to be an unbelievably awesome governor of Florida. Like, that place is a free country. It's not just for old people and military and then the interior anymore. Now it's like it's a vibrant and really interesting place. I've been going down there a lot.
Well, let's talk about why Ron. You just made a point that connects to another point you made, which is that there are people in Washington who still believe that Donald Trump is a personality to so many of his supporters. They're with him because he's the host of The Celebrity Apprentice, and he just is such an engaging, magnetic personality. And I think that's true for some people. But Ron DeSantis, why is he popular, and why is he a potential heir to the sort of Trumpism that we've seen? It's really because it's really because of the temperament that he's adopted from Donald Trump, right? This sort of take no prisoners, don't apologize, be boldly conservative, bold colors, not pale pastels, as Ronald Reagan would say. And I'm not comparing Trump and Reagan there, but I am saying that that sort of temperamental approach to this, which is screw the establishment, screw the corporate media, screw big tech, screw all of the leftist arbiters or gatekeepers of our culture. I'm going to do what I think is principled and right. It's really the temperament in his case, I think, that makes him sort of easily connected with Trump.
Yeah, and his willingness to go to combat with the press and his complete unwillingness to be bulldozed by them. I mean, Florida is doing really, really, really well in terms of death counts, in terms of economic recovery, in terms of treating their citizens like their citizens. Similar to how South Dakota is doing, but Florida's a bigger state than South Dakota with a lot more people in it. And if you read the press, he's public enemy number one, and he hasn't bowed down once to that kind of fighting spirit. And he's got that kind of tough guy bravado too that Donald Trump has. Those combine really well together. But the GOP is also going to have to take a look and see what this whole COVID resettlement does to a country that's already getting more blue. Like Wisconsin, Michigan, Pennsylvania are battlegrounds at best. They're far from red, and they're blue-leaning purple. Georgia is increasingly becoming blue. Colorado, New Mexico, Arizona, these places are starting to go blue. Florida is going more red, but even that's by 3 points. And Texas is, I know people have been saying it forever, and I always say, don't worry, Texas isn't changing Republicans. Don't panic here right now, but it is changing. And you have to wonder, where are these votes for future Republican presidents going to come from if they don't adopt the Donald Trump kind of winning strategy? And, Donald Trump's strategy in 2016 was very different from his strategy in 2020. 2016, it was we're going to end these endless wars. We're going to build this wall. We're going to stop illegal immigration. We're going to protect our churches. What was it? The second time, it was just culture war. It wasn't what we're going to accomplish. By the way, he accomplished almost that entire first aspect of his. He accomplished what he wanted to in the first 4 years, but he kind of ran a campaign that wasn't pushing those things. If you push those things, then that you might actually be able to win back some of the voters that it was overcome in Pennsylvania, Wisconsin, Michigan, et cetera.
Right. And this actually all reminds me, this conversation about DeSantis reminds me of something that I was thinking about recently, which is that there was a time, literally just 5 years ago, where Republicans would be terrified of a big write-up coming, a hit piece coming for them in the New York Times, or they would be terrified of some slanted coverage in the Washington Post. Now they literally fundraise off it. They thirst for it, right? Like they thirst for it, they hunger for it, they want it because
it was
now
Newt Gingrich who did that, right? In the Republican debate like 8 years ago.
Right.
He went right at the paper. He went right at the moderator, and it just did really well.
Well, here's somebody who has his finger on the pulse of the conservative movement and the Republican voter base. I mean, Newt Gingrich always has, and that I think is very telling that he was the person that did that in 2012, and that it sort of was so resonant, and that's something that people should have remembered and looked at and thought about. But this is like, it's remarkable to me that it took so long for the Republican Party to realize that it's completely fine to get bad press in the New York Times. In fact, they always should have been fundraising off of it because
their base sucks so much.
Well, and their base is completely woke on how terrible the media is, right? Like their base understands it. Right. No, 100%. Well, tell me about
Capitol Hill staffers who just want to be friends with the WAPO reporters.
Yeah, you cover the Hill closely. And for people outside DC, can you explain a little bit of the dynamic you're talking about right now?
A lot of even good and conservative members have staff who are Washington, D.C. careerists, who are liberal-leaning Republicans, who are embarrassed by the conservatives and think they're knuckle draggers. They're like, a lot of these staff don't have really anything in common, except for maybe where they're from, with a lot of the voters for President Trump, and even for their own bosses and for the GOP. And they're constantly sabotaging their bosses. Also, especially in communication shops, they have an understanding, even before the complete ghettoization of media, that they have a much better Rolodex when they leave their job, especially if they're in the administration. If they have a bunch of contacts and friends at the Associated Press, at Reuters, at New York Times, at Washington Post, CNN, than they do if they go to corporate America and say, all right, I've got a dozen friends at the Federalist, the Free Beacon, the Daily Caller, Fox News. The corporation's going to say, how about the New York Times? Because that's what they want, because they're liberal. And because of that, a lot of these press staff cultivate relationships. To try and fill a room with, I mean, I get calls frequently from friends, personal friends. It's not like I'm a Republican hiring person by any stretch. I'm not even really part of the party. But I'll get calls from people saying, do you know any actually like Young Americans for Freedom types, like some actual conservatives? Because I can't find anyone. And the Republican staffing groups on the Hill keep on sending me 22-year-old liberals who just want to be in DC. I need someone who wants to, I have to be careful because of all the riots. Like, I need like a bomb thrower or something. Like, that's the old term, not trying to push violence here. I was like, I need some bomb throwers. I need some people who are willing to make some noise and upset some people in the room. Do you have anyone? And that's when I, reach out to people in the activist world and say they're looking to hire. It's really hard in DC to get some actually people who are in line with their bosses. Also, a lot of these bosses are complete wusses. Like I've heard stories during the impeachment fight in the House of congressmen like staying up all night, releasing 1,000-word statements, like poring over the Federalist papers, asking for investigations about the impeachment. It's like, dude, the guy gave a speech on the National Mall. There was a riot. There's been years of political protests and riots that have been tolerated by the press. And there was another one. Like, what's the investigation? This is not 9/11. What are you reading the Federalist papers for? You win. Like, it's the easiest vote in the world. You don't vote to impeach your own president when he's leaving office in 10 days. What is difficult about this? But they get themselves all spun up.
Well, so
I get spun up.
I think you raise yes, you do. There's a point here to be made about why the pipeline for true movement conservative talent, especially young movement conservative talent, is, sort of it trickles, right? It doesn't, there's no stream, there's a trickle. And the reason is because all of the incentives in corporate America, all of the incentives in the media are, stacked against real principled movement conservatives who aren't milquetoast and who don't sort of dilute their views to have go to a happy hour with a Washington Post reporter and, pretend that you're sort of actually pro-choice and blah, 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 blah. So, and that says something much larger about our culture, is that there's so many incentives against genuine, authentic conservatism. I think people...
Why would you do it? It's a thankless
Right.
job. It's hard to get hired. You'll get blacklisted. It's like,
nobody
why would you
ever
become a
thanks
Catholic
Chris.
priest in 2020? Why would you become a Trump staffer in 2020? Like, it's not like a pass up in society anymore. You have to be ready for battle.
Well,
let's end on hits.
Let's end on this, because I want to ask you if you think, as we're talking about this is sort of clarifying what I think we probably both agree on, which is that one of the enduring legacies of the Trump presidency will probably be that the power, this had already started to crack with the democratization of media and the blogosphere and everything that's transpired over the course of the aughts and the 2010s. But really, one of the enduring legacies of the Trump presidency will be that the sort of conventional wisdom shattered, because people saw this is sort of accelerationist, but people saw the hypocrisy on full undisputable display, and they saw the shuddering, the silencing of conservative voices, but they also saw the silencing of liberal voices and leftist voices. And there's just a huge chunk of this country now that is so exhausted and disgusted by the left's attempt to seize this monopoly on speech. And I really think one of the enduring legacies of Trump's moment in our politics is going to be that there was an awakening on that, not just among the Republican Party, not just among the MAGA base, but much more broadly in society.
If you told me 4 years ago that on most things, like at the end of this 4-year presidency, on most things, you, Elon Musk, and Glenn Greenwald are going to agree, I would have been like, what? And they'll say, like, oh, and by the way, the Kochs will hate you all. Huh? Really? I would have been very surprised. It's a complete realignment. I mean, it happened within the first year of the presidency, where arguments over Thanksgiving were no longer, is the media liberal? But is the media right to be liberal?
Right,
like people weren't hiding it. And I thought that was cool at first. I generally still think it's cool. I think that media should be much more public, and you should have an idea, like when you read a source, where their author is coming from, because their authors have always been coming from a political point of view. They just hate it better. But now it's dangerous, because now that it's so completely exposed, we're starting to see the raw, naked power of our corporate overlords, who as they waited till Georgia was lost to the GOP so that they would have no oversight over the next 2 years to prosecute and persecute anyone they want to. And then 2, they actually have incentives to go after conservatives. And 3, I think that they're on the right side of history on this. I think that they're doing a righteous, good thing by silencing half the country, which, I mean, takes a special kind of, like, I'm a reporter who likes to go on television. I'm not that egomaniacal by a long shot.
Well, comparatively.
Comparatively,
let's go back to the Tapper scale.
No, like I don't want to silence half the country.
Yeah,
I just want more likes on Instagram.
But I love the way that everyone go follow Chris on Instagram, I guess. He posts pictures of his cat. So I like the way that you phrased it. The conversations over Thanksgiving in just the first year of Trump's presidency were no longer, is the media liberal, but is the media right to be liberal? But we should add something important to that. Is the media right to be liberal because conservatives are bigots, or because everyone else is bigoted? And I think that's what Don Lemon. Lemon. Yeah, he pushed not John Lemon, but this sort of like, if you talk to a lot of people in the sort of like MAGA camp, a huge reason that they support Trump is because they were tired of being called bigots by the left. They were tired of being told that they couldn't express a particular opinion about voter ID laws or welfare or whatever it is without being smeared as a racist. And so
remember how they learned that lesson too?
Right, I know. They really took it to heart.
Why do we call them bigots? We should have never called them deplorables. That was so stupid. Like, there were history lessons taught for 2 years on how not to say deplorable. And now they're like, they're freaking Klansmen.
No, literally, they are saying that.
Hit your head really hard when you were children.
As we are speaking right now, Politico's newsroom is in an uproar over the fact that they let Ben Shapiro take the reins of their esteemed Playbook newsletter today, Thursday. And I guarantee you it's because a lot of those young staffers think that Ben Shapiro is tantamount to that he's on the same sort of level of bigotry and hatred as like the KKK. I guarantee you. We've seen that at The Atlantic. We've seen that at other news outlets with people less conservative than Ben Shapiro.
It's kind of wild to me so Political Playbook's been a really bad newsletter for like 5 years, and it was a pretty good newsletter when Mike Allen was running it back before he checked out. And now it's laughably hysterical, but they're putting up these left-wing reporters and saying that this is a reporter hit, and then they're putting up these conservatives instead. And they're just putting up kind of pundits, and they're attacking it. I mean, Chris Hayes was yesterday. The entire idea of this thing was to try and balance it out.
Yeah. Right. No, exactly. And nobody was complaining about, I mean, it's great. Like, our friend Sagar often talks about the fetishization of objectivity in the media that sort of rose in the era of mass media, televisions and radio that had to go to a wide audience. And it wasn't always like that before. And I mean, if you're okay with Chris Hayes taking over Playbook, you should be ecstatic that Ben Shapiro is doing it as well, so that people can make their own opinions and hear the best arguments from both sides. Absolutely. Well, Christopher Bedford and his cat Buster, right? That's Buster. Yeah, and I'm not going to let you hang out with him anymore. He is a great cat, I have to say. Well, you've been listening to another edition of the Federalist Radio Hour. I'm Emily Jashinsky. He's Christopher Bedford. His cat's name is Buster. We'll be back soon with more. Until then, be lovers of freedom and anxious for the fray.